I'm Jeff, and this podcast is our inaugural podcast, and it's called Coffee Break. And
For now, it could have a different title
yes,
next week.
I did think it was a little anemic, but we can.
But so am I.
But then Mary is, and so it does seem to work.
But we are in an office. We're taking a break on this
Right.
snowy Friday.
It is. It's snowing. It's January 19th for those that are interested in when this was being recorded. And Mary and I thought that we would try something that isn't normally done. Most podcasts try to be funny, but we're striving for absolutely no humor, so
Right.
that. But hopefully, we'll touch on some subjects today that might make you want to actually call the office and say, no, I know exactly what you guys are talking about. I've lived that. And hopefully we could get your interest with some of the topics on office life since COVID and raising children, which is always a fun thing. I'm quite a bit older than Mary, so I have older children.
Yeah. And we don't have to go into specifics, but I believe we're exactly 40 years apart.
That is correct. We don't have to go into specifics,
Right.
but
it's an interesting fact. I
It's-
didn't realize it was exactly 40.
I've thought of it. I've
Yeah.
actually thought of it.
Yeah.
And yet we still have things in common.
Totally.
And I'm still coming to the office, even though you would think somebody at my age would just lay down and have a pretzel. But
But here we are chatting
but
away.
here- exactly. So, Mary, what do you think we should? How do we tackle the office life since
We took on the office life. Let's
Right.
go. Well, here we are, just you and I in the office and nobody else. And that's
That gives
kind
us
of
the
how
time-
it goes
Yeah.
now.
If everyone was in the office, there would be no way we could pull this off and do a podcast.
Yeah, so that's a pro to the hybrid
Right there.
work life.
So many of you that are working from home might consider going to the office so you can do a podcast like this, because you're certainly not going to do it alone in your home.
Yeah, I
with
mean, you
the-
could be sitting in this gorgeous studio space we have here with wall-to-wall windows looking out at
Oh, it's beautiful at the water.
Yeah.
We have. So,
So
should I ask you a question or two, Mary? I mean, do you think we should deal with?
well, I'm curious, as we've adjusted to our hybrid work life here and more people are going remote. I think they say something like, I don't know, getting close to 50% of people work remotely, but it's hard to actually get that data, I assume, because there's people like us that
Yeah, but don't
we're
you
doing
think
our own
people that
thing.
work from home, and it can go either way, but people who work from home actually work harder than if they're in the office because they work longer hours. And
Yeah, you can get right to it. There's no
right, if something needs to be done at 7 p.m. and you've been at home all day, first you make dinner or have dinner, and then you get to to those projects that weren't finished. So
Yeah, and it's tricky. I mean, especially now that you have households with two working parents, that didn't used to be the case, and now you do. And it's like, how do you do everything
know.
and get to work and have a house that isn't a complete disaster?
Since I've been married for a long time, I thought we should maybe bring that up because most people are a two people working household.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have two separate checking accounts or do you have one?
Great question. I guess that depends on the people, but we only have one.
And so
At
do
the-
I.
Actually,
You have a secret one,
that's
don't
not,
you?
no, Ryan has a secret
He
one.
does.
Yeah. He does have one that he's had forever.
And he's not giving that up.
I used to before we were married and we were moving around a lot.
But he always found
But then once we moved back here and got married in New York, then
Yeah, exactly.
it was just easier to have the one. When you're
Funny.
paying rent from one or,
Moving around a lot.
all that
brings
stuff,
My
all the
parents
bills.
moved around a lot when I was young, but I always found them.
Were they happy about that?
They weren't happy about that. And working from home, just as an aside for those listening in, it's not uncommon to call out for fast food. And do you ever find yourself ordering Chinese food in a Chinese accent?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
Just
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I want to know where that one's going.
no, I thought that.
From your joke cards here.
Yeah, I do have.
I love it.
I'm looking at some joke cards exactly, so we could keep
I
this
love it.
thing.
You have to
moving.
save your best joke for
Right.
the end of the podcast.
Okay.
You can have one joke per podcast.
At the end. I tend to go off on tangents, trying to be funny, but always failing. And so for this particular coffee break, we thought we'd delve into office work, which we're touching on right now.
Yeah, because I think it's got to be very interesting from your perspective, going from working in these big time offices.
Yes.
That were almost, I mean, to me in my head, I'm thinking Mad Men style or
Was. And Mary's referring to my time at Time magazine.
your time at Time.
My time at Time, which lasted 16 years, which is a long time.
A long time.
But it was some of the happiest days because it was organized. I loved the whole atmosphere of communications, a big time magazine. Everyone relied on it for the news every week until everyone thought that was too slow. Everyone needed the news today. And so Time started losing relevance because even a weekly wasn't fast enough. You had to have something appear every day, like a newspaper. But even that isn't fast enough. You need to be online because things are changing so quickly. So we get sucked into it. But for those 16 years, it was absolutely marvelous being in that Time Life building, meeting people from all over the world that would just show up, and especially the sales meetings where people from all over the world would come, perhaps 300 people that represented just Time Magazine in one place, like a rock resort in Arizona, Carefree, Arizona. And here's a little funny story, Mary, and then I'm going to stop talking. And
Well, no, I mean, you can keep talking.
And
but
you can take it from here. But I'll never forget this. We were scheduled to have meetings in the morning. Everyone had to be there from 8 to 11, and then in the afternoon you could do what you wished, which is most people golfed. I don't. But you could go to all these sound stages that are built in the desert around Carefree, Arizona, where they shot Westerns, and they had tours all set up for those that didn't play golf that wanted to go on these stage sets and see how a real Western was filmed. So in the morning, we got the business done, the business side of things done, and there's this guy from New Zealand who's reporting in that Time Magazine's circulation in New Zealand had dropped in half. And it went from something like 75,000 copies to 30,000 copies. Mm-hmm. And he explained what he thought was the reason. And this stunned me. Time Magazine was always printed on a coated piece of paper, what you would call gloss, but this is like a soft gloss piece of paper. And it was that way for all over the world. But in order to save money in New Zealand, they decided to just go with uncoated paper. And what I was trying to say is the 70,000 copies were printed on uncoated paper, and then they decided to upgrade the magazine to get more subscribers, and they went to coated, a gloss piece of paper. But
so they made it fancier.
Fancier.
Okay.
And here's this guy from New Zealand addressing all of these 300 people in the room in Arizona on the sales meeting in, if I'm not mistaken, 1984. And he said, as soon as we upgraded, the circulation dropped to 30,000 from 70. And he did a quick survey. He called people. Everyone in New Zealand knows everyone in New Zealand. And they found out that the coated paper you couldn't smoke. People would take the uncoated paper and roll a doobie and smoke their magazine And that was the reason they lost all that circulation. And that has stuck with me all these years, that you could lose circulation because you can't smoke your magazine. So, okay, that was just a little tidbit
That's a great one.
in the publishing world.
We got to remember that for.
Yes, I have
thinking
another
about
tidbit.
paper.
Like you'll go to, let's say, Seattle, Washington, the magazines that were distributed in Seattle or Washington State, and those that are distributed in Florida. And they happen to have the same circulation in those two states, which was something like 400,000 in Washington, 400,000 in Florida. And yet the postage costs for people that subscribe to the magazine, you have to pay for postage to mail these magazines. The postage was about 15% higher in Florida than it was in Washington State, and nobody could figure out why. Same exact magazine, why was the postage 15% higher? Well, it turns out that Florida is very humid, and the paper would absorb water and in Florida, and it would be heavier. And so the paper, unbeknownst to anyone who was trying to decide whether this is a good business proposition or what have you, nobody could plan on a magazine gaining water through humidity that would cause the postage to be higher. And that was something that stuck with me from that stupid sales meeting. That I carry with me to this day. This is what's called useless knowledge.
I don't know. I think it's a very special detail of life that
Yes.
you get to appreciate.
I imagine there's a lot of details to raising children, one different than the
You
other.
imagine?
I would imagine.
You don't remember yourself.
Mine are so old now. Because when I got married, I was among the first ever married and among the first to have children.
Right.
That's how old I am. So I can't really remember clearly, but they're very different, these two sons that I have. And
I have two sons too.
And they're-
one of our similarities here.
and aren't they different in temperament?
Oh, very, very.
How does
they're
that-
different human beings.
They're
Yeah.
right, exactly. But same parents.
Same parents.
It's just
Same
something
genes, but
different wiring harness.
Yeah. Exactly.
In that.
Yeah, that's definitely a topic for a full podcast.
For
there.
a full podcast.
Yeah.
Do you
But I love this because I feel like we should call this Jeff GPT, and we just give a topic for our podcast, and then it just goes off on a complete tangent.
I did do that, didn't I?
No, I love it, though.
No, don't say that, because we want this to all of you, to our listening audience. We want this to be interesting material
Totally.
where you really want to call in, or actually
Okay.
see us.
We're gonna have callers.
We might have a caller.
I like it.
And we might actually film this because it's more exciting to see people talking and getting into it.
Yeah,
you know?
we have a lot of plans here, and this is just
the
first go.
First go, we don't even know where this is going to end. And people out there in the audience are probably saying, really, it's over now, and you don't even know it.
We have so much content here. But going back to, you worked in this office every day, and it just feels like such a different performance to your day than it is just working from home now. I mean, you were commuting into the city, you're going into this big building with everybody in there. I bet you had a bar cart going around.
Yes, Time was, I imagine the other big ones like U.S. News and World Report and Newsweek, the other two big news weeklies, had this, but maybe not. But we had, around 4 o'clock, we had a bar cart go through the hallway asking people if they wanted a drink. I found that so enlivening to be sitting there. You almost didn't want to go home. You wanted to have that drink and hang out with your buddies, whoever they were, at the office. And there was also a guy that came around and shined your shoes, both for men and women. He would take your shoes out in the hallway and he'd shine them.
That's awesome.
You would sit there at your desk without any shoes on, and then he'd come back and you give the guy a couple of dollars. Actually, his name was Jimmy. And I found that to be such a luxury. It was truly wonderful. But you can never, there are benefits to working in an office like that. My wife does not come around at 4 o'clock and offer me a drink at home when I'm in my home office.
Right. You have
And-
a little more freedom, but I guess you're missing
and
the connection and
she's never done my
Those-
shoes.
those fun things, unless you're...
Well, yeah, and then, and I don't know how much the folks in the audience, because it's 2024 now, and I don't know how you can relate to these big office environments, because very few of them exist today.
Yeah, they don't really anymore.
Even the big companies are almost encouraging you to work from home so they don't have to have as much office space, which is a direct hit to the bottom line. But in the Time Life building, there was a kind of a counterculture after work, and you'd go to the U.S. Steakhouse for drinks, and you'd be there with your buddies, and there would be at least 40 people from the office having a drink before they rushed to the railroad to go home to Connecticut or Long Island. And there was one guy who just loved to drink. And he would get so drunk that he would take his shirt off. And he was a Marine, so he had
At the bar?
at the bar. He was in a
Okay.
public bar downstairs in the Time Life building, and he would just take his shirt off to show his tattoos
Of
because he
course.
was a Marine.
That's
And-
what I do too. No.
Exactly. Mary likes to do that. She has a couple of tattoos. So he got into trouble for that because somebody reported that that was unbecoming of a time inker. And he was called into his manager's office, who also was my manager, and that manager's office was right next to my office. So when my buddy went in there to be chewed out in the morning for disrobing, not completely disrobing, just his shirt, he said that's something that no time inker should do in a public place. And this particular salesman, who I'm not going to share with you right now because it's too what's the controversial.
Sure.
But he looked at the manager and he said, "Let me tell you something. I'm a time inker from 9 to 5. Anything I do after 5 o'clock is something that I choose and I do according to the way I like to live my life. So I say we bury the hatchet." And he walked behind the manager's desk where there was a refrigerator. This is at 9 o'clock in the morning. He reached in there and took out 2 beers. And he popped open the beers and he said to the manager, "Come on, let's drink on it." This is how crazy this guy was. But he was such a good salesman
Yeah.
that nobody would fire him. Nobody.
I mean, even that move right there. I mean, he was selling.
He was selling. So that the manager said, "Okay, let's bygones be bygones." And he says, "I kind of understand where you're coming, that your personal life is your personal life, but try to get a grip and don't embarrass time inkers in the Time Life building by doing what you did." But it was, I just looked at this guy and I said, I want to be like him. I just thought that was the most...
And then you took your shirt off.
He
and
was
joined
an outlaw. In those days, I could take my shirt off, but I didn't have any tattoos, so it would have been boring.
That was pointless. So did he stick around for a very long time?
He did. I'll share for those of you that might be from Time Inc. From the old days. His last name was Maylander, and Maylander happened to be blessed with all the cigarette accounts. Now, no magazine takes cigarette advertising because it causes cancer, but in those days we didn't know. So he would, every year at the beginning of the year, Time Inc. would have a gatefold off the front cover about the Marlboro Man. And you could get a Marlboro lighter, you can get a Marlboro sweater, you can get a Marlboro hat, a scarf, all the things that cowboys wear. And they sold that in the magazine one time a year. And my buddy, Maylander, as we went to lunch, we were passing this building. It happened to be the AT&T building that they were building at the time, 55-floor skyscraper. And Maylander said to me, "Stay here. By the way, this is another 60 seconds for me to finish this story. So don't
Here's the
leave
countdown.
if you have to go to the bathroom or grab something to eat. Don't. I just need.
Then they can just pause it.
Oh, they can, right. Oh, right. I forgot that this isn't live and it goes
Unless
away.
they're driving. I mean, well, yeah, they can still.
They can still pause it. Okay. Forgive me. But anyway, he says, hey, Jeff, stay here. I'm going to go up on the construction elevator. So he takes the elevator up to the 4th floor where a guy is welding and sparks are flying. And it just looks like something right out of a movie. And he gives the guy $20, a lot of money in those days, and he took the welder's jacket from the welder, and he put it on, and he came down in the elevator, and he's wearing this Carhartt beige, heavy fabric welding jacket where the sparks could hit it and fly right off. And he and I went down to see his buddy at the who makes Marlboros. I forget the name of the company now who makes the cigarettes. But
Yeah.
we would go right down to that company, and he suggested to the manager, to the senior vice president of marketing, this is the jacket you need to sell when you have the hats and the scarves and the lighters. This is something, and I can get you these jackets.
Philip Morris.
Philip Morris, exactly right. So anyway, the guy at Philip Morris loved the idea, and they sold a welder's jacket because it fit the aura and the identity of a Marlboro man who would get on a horse with a welder's jacket and a hat and a lighter and gloves with the stitched fingers. And I was a part of that. So it was larger than life, and I lived that for 16 years.
And now you're here in an office.
And now I'm here with
me.
Mary, and I couldn't be happier because Mary is extraordinary, and so is everyone else in this office. It's a small office, but you interact with people. There isn't as much distraction. But what involvement there is particularly elegant. It's a great way to communicate and work with people.
Yeah. Well,
So-
all our distraction is just online now instead of
Yes.
in person.
So, and we're keeping, for those of you that don't know, we're talking to you as people that work in publishing. I don't know if we made that clear.
We didn't. We didn't talk about that. I mean, you've talked about paper and
Yes, paper and smoking it.
And smoking it.
We couldn't,
Smoke it if you've got
couldn't
it.
roll it if it was gloss, but you. But if it was uncoated, it was up for grabs. But we're in the publishing business, and it's actually a business that is slowing down, but we still have those fires burning.
Yeah, not for us.
And not
we're
for
making
us.
podcasts.
So,
So I mean, this is a fun time making our
it is.
making our chats a little different here.
So is there any other thing that we should, I was going to ask about music. Music is a hot topic. And
I mean, we can save that for
another
time.
We don't want to
since
dive
we're-
into that because
Unless there's something really good you've been listening to you want to share.
I was going to ask Mary, but we'll save this. We'll end it on this note about, and then we'll pick it up as the main subject in our next podcast, which should come out in a week. But I was going to ask Mary if she had any thoughts about why the zither isn't used more often by hip-hop groups.
It's an excellent question. I think
Yeah.
it's on the minds of many listening right now.
Yes.
Because why isn't it in everything?
What? Right. It's so.
In fact,
I'll-
I'd love to have one on the show. I'd love to play the
Yeah.
zither on the show.
So-
And that could be our theme song.
that could be. All right, we're going to come back with a zither.
So each week we'll have a different theme song. We'll have a different title to our
Okay,
podcast.
All right, so we're going to say goodbye for now. And
Unless we want to do
more?
our segment that we talked about, which would be a question submitted by one of our coworkers in the office who
Did somebody give you that question?
They did not. So I have to start a suggestion box, but I could
Okay.
ask somebody to submit a question right now if you'd like.
Yeah, but while we're on,
Yeah, let me ask right now.
we could probably pause the podcast
I mean, you can
recording.
keep it going.
Oh, keep it going. Okay. So
Well,
we're
let's
gonna
do this in real time.
and see and
Okay, let's see.
and see.
I'll ask our pal Justin.
He would have a question. No question about that. Okay.
See what he says.
Then we're going to talk about food.
Oh,
And
food's
in
a good
our
one.
next podcast, and how it's changed, being that so many people go out for fast food,
Say, so many people don't eat it.
and
anymore.
a lot of people don't eat it. And but I had dinner, just to give you an inkling of what's to come next week. I had dinner the other night, and I don't eat that healthy, so the person I was with said, "God, the only thing missing from this meal is a suicide note," because it was so bad. What I was eating was going to kill me.
Oh no!
So that's why I should have had a suicide. See, if you have to explain the joke,
that means it's a good one.
that mean precisely. That means it's a good one. The only thing missing from that meal was a suicide note. And it's funny, I got a better laugh on the second telling of that than the first.
Hey, that works too.
That
Justin's letting me down right now. I was asking.
yeah,
him
he's
I might have to ask
probably
somebody else.
he's
See, this is what happens with
yeah.
working from home, huh?
And then we're also going to go into the predicament that people who own electric vehicles are having in this cold weather. I actually
Oh, that is interesting. And I saw on my way home the other day when it was super cold, a Tesla van coming from somebody's house where they must have been
they can't
fixing their car.
they can't drive very far because the battery is dying. So
Now it's going to be a battle between Justin and Anthony to see who can give us.
But
the
let me
question
say this.
first.
I remember passing by a Tesla dealer and the mechanic telling the owner that he couldn't repair the brakes, but and because of that he made the horn louder.
Is that your final joke of the podcast?
That would be my final joke, because as a compensation to brakes not being fixed, they made the horn louder. See, again, on the second telling, it becomes very funny, but it's my delivery. I have to work on that. I'm sorry for
That's
those
what
of
this
you.
is for. This is really just
Yeah,
Jeff's podcast to practice his stand-up comedy.
Okay.
You got to start somewhere.
Exactly.
The folks working from home are letting me down right now.
Yeah. Well, see,
They have no questions for us.
I wanted to pause this, but we're going to let this run live
you
until
just-
we get a question. Yeah,
But
exactly.
you just told all those jokes.
I did.
We would have missed all those
We
great
would have missed
jokes.
those great jokes about. See.
All right. Well, I guess next time we're gonna.
Yeah, we're going to
maybe
have to do it next
some-
time. All I can
some-
say is, if I had saved more, I wouldn't be in the office right now. So
And that's a wrap, folks.
that's a wrap.
Until next time.
Till next time. Okay.